Hi, my name is Rebecca and welcome to Yarn and Pajamas. Today is episode number 17 of Hooked on Murder. And essentially a Hooked on Murder is just a crochet and chat where we find just a good project that we want to work on and we crochet, and I tell you guys just a true crime story that I have come across. So today I am working on this just corner to corner blanket here. It's like a rainbow style. It is made with Yarn Bee sugar wheel cottons, I believe, and the color sprinkles on top. So it's a very long-term project. I just break it out and work on it every now and then. I'm in no rush to get it finished. It's just something really, really cool to work on, especially during crochet and chats, because it's very mindless and I don't have to count or anything like that. But today we are going to travel down to Florida and we are going to talk about the disappearance / murder of Jerry Michael Williams. They called him Mike. So and I have some notes here that I'm gonna kind of look at. So Mike discovered his two loves when he was 15 years old. The first one being duck hunting and the second one being Denise Merrill. So he met Denise in high school and fell in love. So later him and Denise did get married and they had a daughter and seemingly had the perfect life until one day Mike goes out hunting and he never returns. During this period, Mike's father had passed away, and it prompted Mike to purchase some life insurance because he wanted to make sure that his family was taken care of in the event that something were to happen to him. So in December of 2000, Mike goes out on a duck hunting trip, and around noon, Denise had not heard from Mike, and she calls her father and it's like, hey, Mike hasn't returned home. I'm worried. I haven't heard from him. He hasn't called. So she also calls Mike's best friend, Brian Winchester. Now, the three of these people, Brian, Denise, and Mike, they all met in high school when they were teenagers. So they have been best friends for years. So Brian and Brian's father, they go out trying to see if they can find Mike. So they go to all of Mike's known hunting spots. And it's at one of these hunting spots that they discover his Ford Bronco parked, but there's no sign of Mike. Later in the area, it was the next day, Mike's boat was found with no Mike. The only thing on board was was the gun case, but the gun case was closed and the gun was still inside of the case. So Fish and Wildlife, they started a massive search for Mike. They are looking everywhere, but pretty soon some theories started to emerge about like what could possibly have happened to Mike. So one of the concerns in this area is that there's a lot of stumps in the water, and they think that Mike had hit one of these stumps with the boat and fell overboard, and because of his waders, it had pulled him down and he had drowned. So investigators started running with that theory, and then pretty soon that theory turned into, because there's more flora in the lake, that his body got trapped and that's why they're not finding it. And then an alligator found it, and they believe that an alligator took the body, and that's why they're not finding a body. So 10 days later, they find an article of clothing that they suspect belonged to Mike, and it was a hat, a camouflaged hunting hat, and that was the only thing that they found. That's when they're like, hey, this guy is, unfortunately, he is an accident of drowning, and we are not going to be able to find his body because it has been taken by an alligator. So this devastated Mike's family. Mike's mother, Cheryl, was just beside herself. Denise was beside herself. Brian was beside himself. Everyone was just beside themselves because Mike was such a great person. So we're going to fast forward for about 6 months. So nothing has happened. The searches have stopped. They have speculated what they believe happened to Mike. And a fisherman is out on Lake Seminole, which is where Mike had been hunting, and he finds a pair of waders floating in the water. So he calls it in because he finds it to be suspicious. And the police come out, Fish and Wildlife comes out, they take the waders, and also in this area submerged in the water, they find a jacket, and inside the jacket is some identification that belonged to Mike Williams. So they believed that this stuff popped up out of the water, and it identifies that Mike has been submerged in the water for the past 6 months and that he's unfortunately passed away. So this prompts his wife, Denise, to file a petition with the court to have her husband declared legally dead. And once she does this, she is able to collect on his life insurance. And remember, I said that he had purchased some life insurance when his father passed away because he wanted to make sure that his family was taken care of. So the person that he purchased this life insurance from was his friend, Brian Winchester, in the tune of like $1.7 million. So all of this money goes to the widow, Denise. And during this time, it's come to light that Denise and Brian have started dating. They have been dating, which is some people considered, like, because they were grieving together and they'd been friends for so long, that it was just a natural progression of things. But some fishy things are floating around in Cheryl's mind because she doesn't believe the story of what happened to her son. She doesn't believe that any of that happened. 5 years after Mike's disappearance and the fact that he was declared legally deceased, Denise and Brian got married. They continue to live in the home that Brian had purchased with his wife, Denise. Brian is raising Mike's daughter as if she was his own, but she's just not having any of it. And she is doing everything that she can to get this case reopened. She is lobbying hard, and she finally is successful. The Florida Law Enforcement, Florida Department of Law Enforcement agreed to reopen the case in 2004. So they're starting to dig around, and they find some very suspicious things going on. The first that we're going to talk about is the waders that they found that belonged to Mike. These waders were like in pristine condition. So they supposedly were submerged in the water for 6 months, from December to June. And during this time, they were supposedly chewed on by a gator. There was no holes in the waders. There was no like lake scum. There was nothing. It was just a pristine pair of waders. So they surmised from this that those waders could not have been submerged in that water or in that lake for any amount of time. It was like they were just placed there. One of the second things that they found was the weather patterns. So the night that Mike went missing, or the day that Mike went missing, there was a storm. And the winds, the way that the winds were blowing, the boat should have ended up on like the Georgia side of the lake, but it was still on the Florida side, like close to the shoreline where Mike's Bronco was located. So they found that to be very mysterious. They don't understand why the boat was found so close to where the Bronco was. Another thing about the boat was when the boat was found, it was found with the engine off and a full tank of gas. So they wondered how, if the scenario was that Mike was standing as the boat was moving, hit a stump and fell overboard, how did Mike turn the boat off? Like, he wouldn't have turned it off. So then they thought, well, maybe something in the way that the motor is built caused it to turn off on its own. So they went to the manufacturer and they talked to a representative who was like a master of these motors. And he said there was no way possible that the motor would have turned off, that it would have just ran until it ran out of gas. And at the end of the interview, he told the law enforcement officers that it sounded very fishy, like what was going on. It was as if someone had turned the boat off and left it just and walked away from it. So the investigators started to wonder, like, how could Mike possibly have turned the boat off if the boat was supposedly moving? And then they thought, well, maybe he turned the boat off first, but then how did he hit the stump if the boat wasn't moving and it was stationary? Another aspect that the investigators found odd was the location in which Mike had went hunting that day. So the boat ramp that his Bronco was found was kind of underdeveloped. It was a dirt boat ramp. Around on other parts of the lake, there were more developed ones that were nicer, that were concrete. But to me, that's not very fishy, and I'll tell you why. So if any of you have been around hunters or fishermen or anybody who does like the game sports, you know that they have their favorite places that they go, but they're constantly looking for new places. So this could have potentially just been Mike was trying a new place to go hunting, which is not unusual for hunters to do. So I wouldn't have found this to be suspicious, but the hunters, the investigators did. Another thing, after talking with more of Mike's friends and hunting buddies, they surmised that Mike did not like to hunt alone. But again, this is another thing that I wouldn't have found fishy, because a lot of hunters and fishermen, when the opportunity presents itself, like they go, even though they usually like to be with other people, they will go hunting alone. But one of the things that the investigators did find interesting, that after talking to this hunting partner that Mike had, was the safety consciousness of Mike. That he was very safety conscious and did not put his waders on until he was at the spot he was going to be hunting at, and he was getting out of the water. So he would not ride around in the boat with his waders on for fear of the fact of the boat ejecting him and then him drowning in the water due to the fact that the waders will pull him down. He was very conscious of that for the reason of not wanting to put that on his family, that he died in a hunting accident. So the investigators found that very suspicious, and I agree with them on that. Most hunters are very safety conscious, and they generally abide by the safety rules that they have always had. The investigators uncovered like zero new evidence. They had their new suspicions. They had these new ideas from talking to new people, and how they found that these things just weren't adding up, but there was no concrete evidence for them to move forward in arresting someone. So in 2007, the case was officially closed by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. They couldn't move any further. This very much disappointed his mother, Cheryl. She was hoping that something new would come from it, but it just unfortunately didn't. But a year later, the Florida's Department of Financial Services, the Fraud Division for Insurance, they started their own investigation just to make sure that no fraud had been committed due to the fact of the payout for the life insurance was so large. But their investigation did not stay open very long. Again, they couldn't find any new information that would lead anyone to think that Mike had died in anything other than a tragic accident. But his mother, Cheryl, she was so persistent. She had billboards made. She wrote articles for newspapers. She contacted the ID channel, and the ID channel done one of their television shows for the missing people. They done a show about Mike. She had like a letter campaign going to the governor. She herself wrote letters. Other people in the community wrote letters. And then eventually she found out that those letters, they weren't even opened by the governor of Florida. Like, no one in his office even opened them. They were forwarded unopened to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement and just placed in Mike's file box. One of the investigators finally told her about it because, you know, he felt really bad, and he's one of the investigators that didn't agree with like the outcome of the case. Like, he believed something bad had happened to Mike, and so he let Cheryl know that, you know, her letters were not going to where they were intended to go. And this, like, really just, she felt so defeated after this. So during all of this time, Denise and Brian are married. They're living in Mike's house, but things are not happy ever after in this marriage, and the marriage takes a rocky turn. In 2012, Denise files for separation from Brian, and in 2015, she files for divorce. So her and Brian are getting a divorce, and Brian is slowly coming unhinged. So one day in 2016, Denise is heading to work. She gets in her car. She is on the phone with her sister, and someone pops up in the back seat, and lo and behold, it's Brian. And Brian is giving her directions of where she needs to drive to. But Denise, she's not having any of that. She pulls into a CVS parking lot, and she starts talking to Brian. And Brian is telling her how he wants to unalive himself, that he feels like his life is over without her in it, that he can't go on with life, that he just, you know, he needed her. And Denise, she pacifies him. She's like, you know what? You're right. We're going to try to work on this. And you know what? I'm not going to go to the police. I'm not telling them anything about what's happened here today. Let me take you back to your truck. I'll drop you off. We'll work this out. Everything is going to be fine. So Brian believes her, and she drives him all the way back to where his truck is located. And as he's getting out of her car, he is taking the items that he brought with him, which were this big tool of some kind, a cloth sheet, a plastic sheet, like a plastic tarp, some bleach. And so Denise is like, okay, those are some weird items to have if you only planned to unalive yourself, because that looks to me like you plan to unalive me as well. So after dropping him off, Denise goes to the police department, and she's like, hey, this just happened. So they arrest Brian. Brian goes to trial, and Brian gets some serious time over this incident. He gets like 20 years plus 15 years probation. So, I mean, that's a long amount of probation. I'm just saying. But only 20 years. And then the very next day after, his sentencing, a press conference is held. And guess what they say? They say that they have found the remains of Mike Williams. Seems like excellent timing, doesn't it? So in 2018, Denise is arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder and murder. So Brian, when he made like a sweetheart deal. So he makes a deal that takes any charges for the murder of Mike Williams off the table. So he's not been charged with anything connected to Mike's death. He gets charged with the kidnapping and burglary and is sentenced to the 20 years plus 15 years probation. And they took the life sentence for kidnapping off the table. If he would tell the truth about what happened to Mike Williams. So he took this deal, he took it, and he proceeded to tell them that him and Denise had a relationship when they were in high school, that relationship continued on and off throughout the years, even when he was married to his wife Kathy, and when Denise was married to Mike, the relationship continued. So at one point, the two started talking about getting rid of their partners and ways that they could do it. And one of the ways that Brian said was Denise came up with a boating accident that would kill Brian and Kathy. So he says that he is 120% sure that Denise is down for murdering both his wife and her husband. And he's like, hold up, I don't want to murder my wife. She's the mother of my kids. I don't want to do that to them. I'll just divorce her and, we can just murder your husband. Or, you could divorce your husband. And she's like, oh no, I can't divorce him, because if I divorce him, then I could lose, custody of our daughter. And plus, he's got all this money in insurance, life insurance, so we could benefit from that. So then the murder plot hatched. And the plot was that Mike would go out hunting with Brian, and that Brian would push him over, he would drown, and voila, it was just a hunting accident. So, and that's what they proceed to do. So they're out on the lake, Mike and Brian convinces Mike to put his waders on early. They had not arrived at their spot yet. So he puts his waders on early, and once he gets his waders on, Brian just pushes him out of the boat. Now, here is where some unfortunate things for Brian and Denise started happening. Mike was able to swim over to one of the stumps that was protruding out of the water and hang on and start taking his waders off. So the only thing that Brian could do was to shoot him, and that's what he does. But then Brian is in a conundrum, because here he has a body that has been shot, so they're not going to think that it was an accident from hunting. So he motors over and gets Mike's body and drags it back to shore. Now, how they didn't find blood, I don't know. I don't know what the crime scene looked like, but he gets the body Mike into his truck. He drives to a different location. It's on the edge of another lake in a different county, and he buries him. And he comes back, and I'm gonna assume he stages the scene, pushes the boat out and all of this stuff, and he cleans up and he waits for Denise to call him, and then all the rest proceeded. So they put Denise on trial for this, and they convict her. She is convicted and sentenced to life. She's got life plus 30 years. So she was convicted for murder and conspiracy to commit murder. So for murder, she got life, and for conspiracy, she got 30 years. And now, mind you, Brian has nothing. He has his 15 years that he's gonna, he has his 20 years, which I don't know what Florida's, how their prison system works, but he could potentially only do 50% or 75% of this time, and get out on like his time cuts and good behavior and stuff. So, but he'll have the 15 years probation. That's a lot of probation, but yeah. So in 2020, on an appeal, Denise did win and her murder conviction was overturned, but her conspiracy to commit murder conviction was upheld, and so she was just sentenced to 30 years in prison. And another thing that happened was she had to sign over all of Mike's estate to her daughter, specifically the monies from life insurance, because she was getting ready to be charged with insurance fraud. And as long as she signed that over to the daughter, they wouldn't come after her. So she did. And there's a stipulation in there that none of that money can be used for any legal issues for Denise. So the daughter cannot use any of that money to help her mom out. Like, she can't give her mom money to, have in prison. She can't pay for legal bills, none of that stuff out of the money from her dad's estate. And the daughter does stand by her mom. So, but she was primarily raised by her mom. And Cheryl is happy that Mike was found and that he came home. She was happy that the people that done this to Mike were caught and that they have been sentenced to prison. She was unhappy with the sweetheart deal that Brian got. She feels like he got away with murder, which he did. But that, guys, is the disappearance / murder of Mike Williams. And guys, I have some thoughts on this one, like some major thoughts. I cannot believe that this woman was convicted solely on the testimony of the husband, the ex-husband that she had put in prison for kidnapping her. Like, there was no evidence whatsoever about this. No phone calls, no text messages, no letters, no notes, no nothing. There's nothing to prove that, one, that they were having an affair, and two, that she had asked him to kill her husband. So here's my opinion, and it could be unpopular, I don't know. But my opinion is they were having an affair. I believe that Brian wanted them both to divorce their partners and be together. But Denise did not want that. Denise said, no, I have a husband, I have a family. We've been together since we were 15 years old. I will be blowing up my life. I could lose my daughter. I could lose the respect of my family. I will lose the respect of his family. I'm not doing this. So I think that Brian got it in his head that I'll do it then. I don't have to kill my wife because I'm willing to divorce her. So I'll just divorce her and get that, out of the way. But since you're not willing, this is what I'll do. I don't think that he told her anything. I think maybe through the years she probably had some suspicions that this was, a possibility. But if you think about it, here's a man that she obviously loves. She's known him since she was 15. They have been, I don't know if they were together back then when they were younger, or if that was just a yarn that Brian was spinning. But either way, they've been close throughout the years. I believe they came together, were having this affair, so she had affection for him. And then when she's grieving her husband, he is grieving his best friend, and in that grief they came together and a deeper kind of love developed. I believe that love, because it was based on grief, that's why it didn't last. And as his life was falling apart, he's like, I have done this major thing to have you in my life. I killed my best friends and I'm going to have nothing. So I believe that he was going to kidnap her and kill her as well. I don't know if he was going to take her to the specific location where Mike was, but that's what I believe he was going to do, because obviously it was a good location, because Mike was never going to be found where he was at. I believe he was going to do this, but I believe because he was so convinced by the words that Denise told him that he was like, oh, everything's going to be fine. But when she turned him in to the police and he got charged and he was going to prison, he was like, you know what? I am not going to go down by myself. If I am not going to be able to have you, you are not going to be able to have this life. So I honestly believe that Denise did not have any knowledge about what happened to her husband. I don't believe Denise was innocent in the fact that, you know, she wasn't doing some shady stuff with the best friend while the husband was alive. But I don't believe that Denise was conspiring with Brian to kill Mike. I believe that Brian done this on his own to have what he wanted. What are your guys' thoughts about this? I'm gonna go and try to find the ID show, the missing show. If I do find it, I will try to link like what I can find down below. It may be a little bit after this video is posted, but I will try to get it in there. This was one, they're all sad, but I found this one to be so sad because of the mom, Cheryl. She just was not, she was relentless. And I believe that had it not been for Cheryl, that things would not have been so easy to believe. And maybe that played a part in cracking Denise down, breaking down the relationship that she had with Brian. Yeah, I don't know, but I believe that, I mean, Cheryl was not going to rest until she got her son back, and I'm so happy that she did get that closure in her life. I couldn't imagine what she was going through, and it sounds like that her husband had passed, you know, just shortly before Mike's passing, like within a couple years. So her family, I mean, she took some blows there for a while, and I'm hoping that the relationship with her granddaughter is good and strong, and that she had been able to be with her granddaughter throughout the years. It didn't say anything in all of the research that I found about it. Maybe I'll find out more about that in that video. Maybe I should have watched the video before making a video, but I'll let you guys know down in the little description box what else I can find out. Well, as far as doing my crochet, I got about this much done. Not a whole lot, because I kept putting it down, but what are you gonna do, you know? Okay guys, I don't know if you guys noticed, but back here we have like a little special guest. That's Belle the bee, I guess. She finally traveled here to Ligonier to hang out with me a bit. She's been buzzing around, just so happy. So I'm going to find some fun, cool things to do with Belle. I believe that she was asking if she could go to work with me tomorrow, so I may take her to work. It's not going to be fun, Belle, because I don't work in a fun place. It's no fun. But she has been outside pollinating my little garden. It's been just wonderful. So I am having a fun time with Belle visiting. Well, I will let you guys go. I hope you enjoyed this installment of Hooked on Murder. And I'm hoping to get way back on track with, you know, doing my videos and my murder videos, because, you know, I'm a true crime junkie just like some of you guys are. So I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.